Hi, welcome to the Amato Report. At this time, let me welcome former Lieutenant Commander in the U.S. Navy, currently a candidate for Congress in Arizona, District 4. He is someone who is a Muslim American and has been both a supporter of Israel and has for decades been warning the West and the U.S. about radical Muslims. He was appointed to a committee on religious freedom by Mitch McConnell back in 2012. Let me welcome Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. Zuhdi, good to have you with us.
It's great to be with you, Rick. Thanks for having me on.
Zuhdi, I want to get into Iran. I want to hear about your election in Arizona. But before we do, I'd like to get your take on New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani. Is he someone that the U.S., the West, should be concerned about? Or is he someone that, no, there's just someone that has a different point of view or than what we're accustomed to? What's your take on that?
Well, I have to tell you, Rick, as a doctor, I look at many things the way you'd look at patients and diseases and treatments and things like that. And there is no single patient that has more to learn in pathology for the West and America than Zohran Mamdani, because he basically is a confluence of the two threats that are the greatest to the West, which is Marxism, radical socialism, and jihadism or radical Islam or political Islam. In one human being, we have both entities. When I started testifying to Congress about the threats of radical Islamism, political Islam, and its manifestations through Al Qaeda, ISIS, the Muslim Brotherhood, the Khomeinists in Iran, and all these entities of Islamic supremacism that wield Sharia or Islamic law as their instrument of oppression and repression. I started to say, listen, you might not think that Muslims are that much of an issue or Islamism is not an issue in America because we're barely 1% of the population. But in Europe, it's 10 to 15% of the population in places like France and Germany. And then across the Middle East, it's a quarter of the world's population globally. So ultimately, if you radicalize 20% of 1.8 billion people, that's hundreds of millions of people weaponized to hurt the West. And I said it's going to come also for your children in universities in the West and in the left, because they will have a suicidal empathy with the Islamists because of identity politics. And sure enough, around before COVID and then during COVID, we saw BLM marching in the street, terrorizing our communities, our businesses. And there was a synergy between Islamist radicalism and Marxism and the Nation of Islam and a lot of that radicalization. And then lo and behold, after October 7 with the genocide against Israel, you saw a coalescence of the radical left with political Islam, where all of a sudden black was white, white was black, right is wrong, and wrong is right. Everything was upside down, where the terror organization Hamas was the sympathetic group, and Israel, our greatest ally in the world, which is fighting the righteous fight against radical Islam, was demonized. So it was just, I said, I hated to say I told you so, but many of us, we formed a coalition called Clarity Coalition, Champions for Liberty Against the Reality of Islamist Tyranny, that was basically similar to the Committee on the Present Danger during the 20th century that was against Soviet Union and the threat, educated the West about the threat of the Soviets. We said now the threat in the 21st century is not only political Islam and radical Islam, but Marxist jihadism. And Mamdani truly represented that, just like the mayor of London, who's been the mayor there for 10 years, Sadiq Khan, has represented what he's done to London. That's just been also a clinic in pathology.
So do you think this opens the door? Do you think for radical Islam in a sense that is it going to grow here in America when our nation's largest city, the financial capital of the world, has a mayor as you just described?
Well, the door's been wide open since the last century, and especially since even before 9/11, with the Muslim Brotherhood groups, the alphabet soup of Islamic organizations, our blindness to Qatar and Al Jazeera and all the weaponization of ideologies that they've been throwing against us. But in some ways, it's basically a good thing because it'll finally bring to head the reality. I just was at Oxford a year ago debating on why me, as a devout Muslim, believes that Islam is incompatible with democracy and why we need to have an offense against these ideas.
Wow.
I'd ask people to look at that speech from October 24 at Oxford, and basically lays out where Islam is in its history and where basically the way Christianity and Judaism was before America, where the battle was against theocracy. Millions of people died in the 30 Years' War, and that's where Islam is today. So we need to stop giving Muslims participation trophies in democracy and start to actually hold them accountable to not the DEI nonsense, which elevates Islam into some kind of race. It's not a race, it's an ideology. Is it compatible with liberal democracy or is it not? And if it's not, we need to start holding them accountable to meritocracy and other issues of reform that need to happen, which is why we formed the Muslim Reform Movement to start to say, here's our declaration, the Muslim Reform Movement declaration of things that would be able to separate Muslims that are pro-Western, able to live harmoniously with nation states that are Western, like America, versus political Islam that are seditious threats to the West. And the Mamdanis, the Ilhan Omars, Rashida Tlaibs, the Islamic Society of North America, the Council on American Islamic Relations, all of these groups that are anti-Western, anti-Semitic, will be exposed if we start to have an offense against these ideas. And as we see now happening in Iran, this is a major alignment, an opportunity for the West that's happening, which is we're seeing 70 million Muslims that may ultimately be freed from a theocratic, oppressive mentality that is going to be a millennial type shift in a defeat for political Islam. And for the first time, we're seeing an offense against the theocrats.
Well, you take me to my next topic there, Zuhdi. What do you think is going to play out in Iran here? I know Trump, a couple years ago, he had an attack on Iran and waited for the people to come up out of the streets, but they felt it was too dangerous. That never occurred. What do you think in your crystal ball? How's this play out?
Yeah, so in some ways this is uncharted territory, but in other ways, there's probably three or four maybe different eventualities that may happen in Iran. Bottom line is all, if you look at all three, it's a much better possibility than sitting back playing the whack-a-mole we've done since they were the founding satans of suicide bombing with Hezbollah targeting our Marine barracks in '83 and on to the thousands upon thousands of suicidal attacks and letting them even come close to nuclear weapons, ballistic missile opportunities in which they would take their country with them, because to them, nuclear weaponry, end of times weaponry, is an extinction event that they would celebrate because they celebrate fratricide. So they cannot be allowed to have that. So our security is depending on preventing them from the continued mayhem of chaos they've done with Hezbollah, with the mayhem against our troops and allies in Iraq, against the Houthis targeting ships, etc. So there might be an increase in some of the terror threat because of the active war, but it's not like it wasn't there. They were already attacking us, but this is the first time we've had an offense. And there was an alignment which the beast of the Islamic Republican Guard Corps of Iran, the terror military, was pushed back to where their economy was broken completely. Their university populations were pushing back against the government. The women's movement of 19 was pushing back against the government with millions in the streets. The anti-clerical movement was pushing back. The Green Revolution of '09. So you had a sonic boom of revolutions over the last 15 years that pushed them back to where they have no weapons, but they were still putting the government on its heels. So that was going to go away if we didn't do something. So the bottom line is this isn't regime change. This is a decimation of a regime militarily so that they lose the military capacity to not only threaten externally the region, but threaten domestically a population that is ready to take over. They don't have the weapons to. So when I said uncharted territory, hopefully we not only are targeting just regional weaponry, but local weaponry. And let me give you an example. In Syria, we saw Assad, 14 years the revolution failed and failed with 800,000 dead. Israel, for 3 weeks, sealed the border in December 24 against Assad and said, you know what, we're done with Hezbollah launching rockets from Syria. They then decimated Assad's entire military in 3 weeks. And all the jihadists needed, the Syrian population needed was to take Toyotas into Damascus, and they were done because Assad couldn't pay his military and his economy was done. And that was after 14 years of an unsuccessful revolution. So Syria is a bit much more of a mess as a result of 14 years of mayhem. But it's very similar in that Iran now is sealed, no money coming in, economy's done. They're not going to be able to pay their soldiers for quite a while. And if we continue this for 1 to 2 months, ultimately the IRGC will fall and hopefully the people take over. It may end up being chaotic with separate different factions, which I hope doesn't happen. If the Kurds and others are able to come together with a central transitional authority that could be the Pahlavis, which is the former Shah, which would be hopefully a constitutional monarchy and not a reinstatement of the Game of Thrones of the 20th century monarchy, then we might see a second option, which could be a transitional government that would be, again, another more positive eventuality. So that's the three options, and there's probably a few others, but that's the major ones.
So if am I accurate in my take on your take in that regardless of which option of the three occurs, it's going to be a positive outcome?
I hope so, because at the end of the day, even the worst outcome, which is a fractionated, chaotic, failed state,
Yeah.
it still is not going to be an IRGC that is weaponized to try and look at what they did. They said they care about their brothers and sisters, but they started to target fratricidally Arab countries, Muslim countries, etc., because they wanted to create this end of times phenomena. Because they say when they go to the UN, they're bringing in the 12th Imam. That 12th Imam is a theological signal for Armageddon. So that's what they want. And ultimately, a failed state, as much as it'll give some room, hopefully, for the revolution to hopefully then be ushered in. If it doesn't, it's still better than the option that we have now.
There's a report out that happening right now. I've just learned about it 10 seconds before we came on the air. That there's a warning that Iran through Hezbollah will have there's a risk that there's going to be drone attacks in California. How realistic is that? If I mean that's a long way for the drones to travel if I interpret this properly, for them to not be intercepted. Is that a should we be concerned about that news report?
Well, listen, we should be concerned about anything because this is like treating a patient with cancer. The chemotherapy that's necessary at the hive mind in Tehran is going to cause metastases all over the world to begin to act up because they're going to be on the verge of extinction all across the planet as Iran vanishes in its power supply. And as that disappears, thanks to Obama Biden, we've got millions of unvetted people in this country that may have included, by the way, you'll see in the New York Times a piece from 8 years ago that talked about Hezbollah's operation with the Mexican cartels in looking at weaponry and bringing even drones and other things in. So I would not be that sadly surprised to know that there's some threats that combined cartel operations with Hezbollah, and then they're trying to operationalize that. So we need to be vigilant. That threat exists, but it was there anyway. And we just need to, as we do away with the central tumor cells, hopefully our Homeland Security is doing everything possible to find that before it finds us.
Zuhdi, how's the congressional race going there in Arizona for you?
Well, this is the season. This is the year in 26. This district is winnable. Greg Stanton is the current member of Congress. It was redistricted in 21. He's a Democrat, barely on 3 points. And I've got the profile to flip this seat with 39% independents, 33% Republican, 30% Democrat. I've got Turning Point Turning Point Actions endorsement was also close to Charlie Kirk, and Seth Leibson is endorsing me, Glenn Beck, Mark Levin. We've got great endorsements, and we've been basically cleared the primary field this time. I lost the last primary by a few points. This time there's really no primary, and we'll be going into the general full blow to expose how much of an empty suit Greg Stanton is, and how much, I'll tell you, as a doctor in primary care, healthcare is at the top of the ballot. Not only did the left weaponize healthcare against our patients, but the budget problems, the Unaffordable Care Act, the unaffordability of being an American and a patient is at the top of the ballot. And we as conservatives and Republicans have the answer to that. The left simply wants to rack up more taxes and make things more expensive for big healthcare, which is the big problem.
Well, Zuhdi, I appreciate you joining us. It's been a while for our viewers out there. I used to interview Dr. Zuhdi Jasser back on One American News back in those days. And I think even back on my radio show in San.
Yes,
Okay, yeah.
we
I
did. Absolutely.
Hey, if it helps, I don't know if it does, but let me just say this. I'm going to be moderating a congressional debate in Los Angeles in 2 weeks, and I've got a couple of other debates I'm moderating across the country. But if it helps you, let me just say that I'm endorsing you right now for your
Thank you.
congressional race in Arizona, and you're welcome to use my name should you feel it's valuable to you. That's your call.
It absolutely helps. Politics is about addition, and we're going to win this race, and I think make a major splash. People should go to Z4AZ, number 4AZ.com to help us join the movement. And this is a movement. I can flip the script on the Ilhan Omars of the world. And as the only Republican doctor running for Congress that's not in office now, we can also flip the script on big healthcare across the country. So thank you for joining our movement, Rick, and it is a blessing to have you.
All right. Well, you're welcome. Zuhdi, thanks for joining us, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
There's Dr. Zuhdi Jasser with his take on Iran and so forth. And if you're in Arizona, District 4, vote for Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. Back with more after this.